Welcome back to the Twits. We're just going to keep on moving today and go through a couple more chapters probably. Okay, so last time we had no pie, no bird pie for Mr. Twit, and still no bird pie for Mr. Twit. And in those chapters, Mr. Twit discovered that his plan to just smear the sticky glue on the tree like he'd always been doing wasn't working. He doesn't know that Mugglewump knows a bird that speaks British bird language. He doesn't know that Mugglewump can speak to birds either. I'm sure he doesn't know any of these things. Anyways, and so he comes outside. There's no birds in his old dead tree. They're just all up in a tree laughing at him. And so he decides to go ahead and smear both of them. Smear both the monkey cage and the old dead tree because he figures they're going to come in and land somewhere. He'll have them. But he still doesn't know that these animals are sentient and talking to each other. And so he still doesn't get that either. And so that last chapter ended with the roly-poly bird once again singing a warning to his bird friends to not land anywhere or you're going to end up in these ghastly people's dinner with your feet still attached and all your feathers. Oh, gross. Okay, so that brings us back up to where we are to now. Okay, so the first thing we do is we look through all the pictures and we look at the title. The title gives us the main idea of basically what's going to happen in this chapter, or at least a good idea of what we can be thinking about beforehand to give us a little bit of prior knowledge about it. Okay, and then we also look at the pictures. The pictures help us visualize as we read. And so we'll start with the title. This one is called Mr. and Mrs. Twit Go Off to Buy Guns. So they're going to leave their area to buy guns. That's what I've been thinking as I read that title. What are they buying guns for? It doesn't tell me. I come over here and I see the birds are on a building that does not look like the monkey cage, and it does not look like an old dead tree. There's only two other buildings. There's a shed, and there's the Twit's house. So I'm going to assume this is a house because I see a chimney. And we don't often put chimneys on our sheds. I know, weird. And so we see, oh, there's Mr. Twit. He's angry. Looks angry. Looks like he's looking up. And there's something in his arm. There's something, it looks like a basket. Maybe some glue at the side of him. Let's keep looking. Oh, and then we see the Mugglewump family standing on their heads, looking terribly unhappy, standing on their heads, not only that, but in a line going straight up. I don't know about you, but if somebody said, you and your family all stand up on your heads, everybody up on top of the other one, it'd be like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Broken necks. Anyways, but monkeys are different than humans. So anyways, so that's the only that's the only three pictures in there. We see the birds landed on the house. We see Mr. Twit looking mad, and we see the Mugglewump family having to stand on their heads on top of each other. Okay, but they are circus monkeys. They're very acrobatic. Okay. So once again, this chapter is called Mr. and Mrs. Twit Go Off to Buy Guns. Oh, let's talk about the vocabulary in here. There's actually a lot. Okay, so the perched, we're going to mention perched again. Birds sit. It's when birds sit and birds land. We've already been over that one. Frump. This is a made-up Mr. Twit insult. Remember when Mrs. Twit came down from the sky and she was screaming all those things? You frumpless, you know, all those kind of weird things. That's like, it's a made-up Twit insult. Bubbling. It means that the pot that they're going to talk about in here was boiling. Wring the neck, which means to choke something. We're going to talk about wringing birds' necks. They're going to talk about choking birds or maybe wringing monkey necks, I bet. Something like that. Brilliant, which means good idea or genius. And obediently. It's doing as you are told. You do something obediently, you are doing it when you were asked the first time. And it means to obey. We all try to obediently follow the traffic laws as we drive. We all try to obediently follow these laws of quarantine as we're inside all day, every day. Okay, off subject. Here we go. Mr. and Mrs. Twit go off to buy guns. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage. And the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. I'll wipe that silly laugh off your beaks, Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy feathery frumps! I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you. Have you bubbling in the pot for bird pie before this day is out." "How are you gonna do that?" asked Mrs. Twit, who had come outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit went very close to Mrs. Twit and lowered his voice so that neither the birds nor monkeys should hear. "I've got a great idea. We'll both go into town right now, right away, and we'll buy a gun each. How about that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long, yellow teeth. "We'll buy those big shotguns that spray out 50 bullets or more with each bang." "Exactly," said Mr. Twit. "Lock up the house while I go and make sure the monkeys are safely shut away." Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Attention!" he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer's voice. "Upside down, all of you, and jump to it. One on top of the other. Quick, get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit's stick across your backsides." Which means he's going to he wants Mrs. Twit to hit them in the back with the stick. "One on top of the other." There it is. Obediently, the poor monkeys stood up on their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest monkey on the very top. "Now stay there till we come back," Mr. Twit ordered. "Don't you dare to move, and don't overbalance. And when we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find all of you in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?" With that, Mr. Twit marched away, and Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. And that's the end of that chapter. So in this chapter, Mrs. Howard didn't sing. You're welcome. And we discovered that Mr. Twit is a little bit suspicious that maybe they understand what he's saying because he talked low voice with his wife. Okay. Mrs. Twit, however, was talking about guns that spray out 50 bullets at one time pretty loudly, so I'm pretty sure that she's not that concerned. And we don't know yet whether the monkeys understood that they're going to go buy guns to shoot all the birds, or if the birds heard that. We don't know if the monkeys are going to just stay on their heads for 3 hours. That sounds awful. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we do know that Mr. and Mrs. Twit have left their property for the first time together in this whole book. And it may be the change of the plot. We shall find out.